Hello, GoldCore clients, subscribers, and viewers. I hope you're all well. I recently caught up with Jim Willie of the golden-jackass.com on the recently launched video channel Gadfly, which is www.thegadfly.vhx.tv, and the links will be below in the description. I always enjoy chatting to Jim, who is always interesting and thought-provoking regarding both the wider world we live in and indeed the world of precious metals. Jim has a very large following of clients who subscribe to his services and who respect his views highly, and we are very grateful to Jim for referring many of his clients to us over the years, specifically for our ultra-secure precious metals storage services. So we have an interesting chat, and it's actually a two-part interview on this occasion. And in the first part, we look at a few topics we look at. One is the risk of war with Iran, and that this is an Iran which will be backed by Russia and China. We look at how the US empire is running on an empty credit card, and how this will most likely be the Asian century. We look at the Achilles heel of the US, which is their massive debt and their fiat dollar reserve currency. We look at how Italian gold reserves and much of the world's gold may end up in Shanghai, how gold may be used as a trade note, and Italy may use their gold reserves as a gold-backed bond. And finally, we join the dots and we look at how there appears to be a stealth move towards a quasi-gold standard or an actual gold standard by China and other powerful nations, increasingly powerful nations in the world. So that's all what's covered in part one. In part two, we look at I suppose, what to do to protect yourself from these risks and the risks in owning I suppose ETF gold and platform gold, and the importance of owning gold in the safest ways possible. So I hope you enjoy part one. We'd greatly appreciate if you like it, if you can share it, and if you can subscribe. And if you have any questions at all, either for Jim or for ourselves, please post them in the comment section. So thank you very much. Enjoy.
Here we go again, another oil tanker hit in the Gulf region, and without any investigation, without any evidence, without any eyewitness, the blame is put on Iran. It's kind of like anything that happens in Europe is blamed on Russia. Anything that happens in the Middle East is blamed on Iran. It gets tiresome, Mark. Yeah. My first reaction was, oh, so Israel did it, and they're blaming Iran. Oh, I get it. Okay. Before I get to my take, what's your take?
Yeah, I think it's quite possible. It's very hard to know what's going on in that part of the world, and there's lots of different players. But I think your analysis there that straight away the blame is put on Iran for anything. There was an event there I don't know, was it a month ago or 2 months ago? But I think it was a similar incident with an oil tanker that was going from Saudi Arabia to the US via Dubai, and a similar thing happened, and there was finger pointing at Iran, particularly John Bolton, who we know is this uber hawk, who is very, very hawkish and potentially would foment a war with Iran. So that happened, and then that sort of petered away. But it's like the whole weapons of mass destruction thing. There's never any evidence. They claimed there's going to be some evidence. I pulled it up there myself. It was funny. A colleague in here said to me 2 or 3 hours ago, he said, have you seen what's happened? He said, it looks like a false flag, So straight away, people they're realizing that
they've done this too much. They've used exactly the same method, the same MO too much.
Going to the well way too much, yeah.
I got to back up just a little bit. You mentioned weapons of mass destruction. I think you're referring to Iraq and the cause for war in 2003. Okay, yeah. I got a nice little juicy story. I'll keep it brief. I met a fellow, let's just call him Billy. And he had a British partner. Partner wasn't important to this conversation. I was interested in doing a marketing project to promote the newsletter, the Hetrick Letter. This was 2009. And I said to Billy, that's not his real name. I said, Billy, where do you come from? He's an American. So where do you come from? What have you been doing the last few years? And he said, well, I was working for Halliburton, in 2003 and 4 and part of 5, and I quit. The stint was over. I said, "What were you doing?" He said, "I was in Iraq." And I went, "Oh, really? What can you tell me?" And he said, "Oh, we found lots of weapons of mass destruction. They all had U.S. markings."
Yeah.
That's why we went in there.
Them to them. Yeah.
We sold. Papa Bush sold it to Saddam. Okay, he said we wanted to get in there quickly and get rid of it all and remove the evidence before it got out on the global stage. And I said, "Was that
Hans Blix, the weapons inspector, that came out in time, So the truth always comes out, but I think people are wise to the fact before on this occasion, as you say, there's more consciousness and awareness of these issues.
Well, there's a joke running around, and sometimes it's more a reality than a joke. Bolton might have put blame on Iran before the incident occurred. This is the error that they occasionally make because they're orchestrating it. Okay,
yeah.
Now I look to see
they're very, very desperate, and underestimates the intelligence of people out there. Yeah.
Right. Well, even for what was it, 9/11? The Australian News Network had the report on 15 minutes before it occurred.
I think that a similar thing happened on BBC. Yeah.
And the JFK assassination, similar.
Yeah. Well, I've just brought up the news story here because I was busy with other things today. And they're saying a U.S. official told CBS News that any retaliation from the U.S. would depend on whether it can recover hard evidence linking the attacks to Iran. Something the official expects they will find after a search of the debris. So they're already saying, we think we're going to find it. So
we've had the debris for a month. We've been working on this. Now this is how it works, and they've lost their credibility. It's the same MO. Okay, here's how I operate. I operate in a slightly different manner, but it's logical. Who has a vested interest in a higher oil price? The Saudis do. Okay, so they might have attacked their own ship. The other Persian Gulf members might have, so they might have attacked a fellow Arab ship. But who's been actively buying oil futures contracts for the last year? Who's been kind of desperate with their energy portfolio pertaining to the shale oil industry? United States and Wall Street banks. Okay. The oil contracts have been purchased by the Wall Street banks and by the Fed, and they've taken some heat for it because it's way outside their charter. And what they're doing is they're trying to support the Wall Street banks. Here's a more difficult question. It's not more difficult. It's just more to the point that twists the screw. What country, what entity has a vested interest in supporting a losing enterprise like shale? It's the Wall Street banks. Here's another add-on corollary. Why are they insistent on keeping the shale industry going? It's because they're running low with a recent decline the last few months in dollar-based oil sales. Okay, so all of the motives point to Wall Street.
It's interesting. It sounds very, very plausible indeed. And I think a key thing is the consideration of Iran, though, versus Iraq. It's a very different proposition. And Iraq had been weakened by sanctions for 5, 10, 15 years, and their society had been decimated. Iran is a completely different kettle of fish in terms of their military capability and how cohesive their society is, but also the fact that they have China and Russia who are not going to tolerate this,
Right.
So it does. I hate to talk about world wars, but it does open up that possibility, And these are, we know Archduke Ferdinand, we know our history. These are how world wars come about, Unless calm heads prevail, and unless Trump steps up to Bolton, and there's hawks both in the State Department now, and in the Defense Department, and in the Pentagon. Trump needs to step up to them and say, we're not tolerating this anymore, And this hopefully will be his moment,
Well, I've got a more gloomy point of view regarding Trump on that. He's not in charge. He's been making statements in the last month or so. I'm getting a lot of pressure to push toward war. Why would anyone pressure to push toward war? It's the neocons. He's not in charge.
No, I think you could be right there.
And
I
really
see that
have
in many things. Yeah.
I have my doubts, Mark, that he's going to run for re-election. I think he's getting sick and tired of the Pentagon neocons and the Bush crowd. This is the Bush neocons. He's got a bunch of Bush neocons running his war situation room, and I'm tired of it. We elected a change, and we got it for a while, but then the Cohen file was captured, and everything sort of changed. He gets rid of a neocon only to put a worse neocon in there. And he's making other decisions that London Paul was pointing out, numerous various decisions where he didn't really need to do anything, but he did the wrong thing. So that's like, with an initiative to do the wrong thing. I don't know. I just think he's going to be in a very tight spot. He's lost a lot of the farm vote. That's a botched, the whole trade. Anyway, we could talk in diversionary style for a long, long time. There's so much, I keep saying it, there's so much going on. You can ramble for 3 hours about relevant stories and keep them all relevant. And occasionally touch on the dollar and touch on gold and touch on, the geopolitical situation. I'm just getting tired of all this. It seems to me, I'm looking for your impression here. Seems to me that the Chinese-U.S. trade talks were making a lot of good progress. In early April, Mnuchin, the Secretary of Treasury, made 2 statements on the same day, early in March. The first saying we have a currency agreement. Later the same day, he said we have an enforcement mechanism agreement. And then a month later, everything falls apart. Here's my impression. They made the guts of a trade deal, and the United States would not agree to the timing.
Yeah,
simple
possibly.
as that.
Yeah,
we got the framework, and we don't have the timing. Why do we not have the timing? I think it's because it's going to cause such a shock to the U.S. economy and the U.S. nation. Because we've got the global currency reserve. We've got the big benefit of printing our own money. We've got the big benefit of taking in finished goods and finished products and shipping out fraudulent paper. We've got the benefit of lower price inflation, although that's kind of falsified. And we've been running on a pretty empty credit card for a long time. The shock will be for a lower, I think we're going to get a lower dollar at first because we've got what I believe to be a Plaza II Accord coming. The whole world wants a lower dollar. But when we get to the reset, everything's going to change. The dollar is going to really have a hard time. Now,
and do you think that is potentially as soon as the G20 at the end of June?
No, because I think we're going to delay another year or two.
Okay, interesting.
And we're going to try to get another war going.
I was going to say, and to get the war going, have a nice distraction with that. We can blame the evil Muslims, the evil Iranians, and
it's not going to work.
The latest enemy du jour.
Well, we'll probably attack an Iranian proxy. We're not good at attacking countries that defend themselves. We're much more capable and have a much longer track record of attacking third world countries that can't defend themselves.
Yeah.
Like Ukraine, like Syria, like Iraq,
Afghanistan.
You can go on, Afghanistan. I mean, these are all third world countries when you get down
Vietnam,
to it.
Back in the day.
Vietnam, yeah. My gosh. Here's my point, though, regarding military and Iran. And well, first of all, before I get to military and Iran, what do you think about the delay tactic? Do you agree with my assessment? They have a framework with the Chinese trade talks, but U.S. just backed out of the room when China said, okay, let's get to a timetable. Let's get this thing working. Let's get a 5-step progress. And the U.S. said, no, you guys, you don't play fair. Oh, we want you to open up your banking sector. Oh, we want you to deal with copyright issues.
And then
They
there's
had a framework.
Huawei, new tech Cold War as well. It seems to be a whole new front in this entire sort of. Basically, it's just two superpowers, and they've been pretending to be best buddies, sort of strategic allies when they're anything but, you know. And now we're beginning to see that they are actually strategic competitors, and all these little synergies that fake synergies that we've had over the years are beginning to unravel before our eyes. So yeah, I haven't considered what you're saying there about the timeline there and delaying it. It rings true to me, but I don't know. My sense of the currency reset is not. I don't think it can wait for a year and a half, 2 years, but potentially it can. Who knows? There's so many variables and different interests. And
well, here's why it can't. The U.S. bond market is fracturing.
Yeah. Big time.
That's, to me, that's the hourglass. And it's a bond hourglass. And how much sand does this bond hourglass have? Not a heck of a lot. And what can they do to put more sand in it, or when nobody's looking, flip it to do it all over again? I don't think they can do much. You've got an inverted yield curve. You've got hue and cry to amplify QE all over again, which will cause a major problem all across the board. I think that'll cause legitimate bondholders to get out for fear that default is coming. Just complete ruin. I think it'll ruin the money market. No one talks about the money market effect. My Euro Raj has taught me a little bit. He's a very wise fellow, still working in the financial sector. He moved around a little bit, but I think it's going to cause a lit fuse to the gold market if they reverse on QE. They go from tightening to easing. It's going to be admission.
The music is there. It's coming. Question is when, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, they're trying to delay.
And Iran could be another excuse to do it. You know. It's.
Well, higher oil price, tax on the U.S. economy. We need to ease. Okay. Yeah, I get that. But so is a parallel argument is we got tariffs on the economy, higher costs, tax equivalent. We need to ease with the monetary policy at the central bank. I don't know if you're aware of this, Mark. This is almost hilarious. If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they do the calculation for consumer price index, if you look at it closely to the component level, you'll see that they put in the trade tariffs as a negative on the price index. They say that China pays for it. China's giving us a discount. That's the argument.
How do they get away with that?
No, well, they don't get away with it.
You'd think some economists or statistician of repute and renown in the US would say, hang on a second, guys. Or even someone who works in a bank who's an analyst who's meant to look at these numbers and crunch these numbers. What are these people doing, you know?
I think they're told, be quiet about that. Just leave it alone. Let somebody else reveal it. I've had 2 or 3 debates in my years with Ivy League PhD economists. Okay, Harvard, Cornell, and I think the other one was Harvard also. One was Richard Benson, who's a very smart gold advocate, sound money, von Mises School, very smart guy. We had no conflict. We saw eye to eye. The other two, the Cornell economist and the Harvard economist, we didn't agree on a damn thing. We didn't agree on, like 15 major points. I had a list going into the conversation. A friend of mine, a former colleague of mine, went to Cornell. He said, Jim, I got a PhD economist friend of mine. He's a friend of a friend. You want to have a phone conversation with him? I said, you mean an argument? And he said, well, whatever. Treat it whatever way you want. And we did. We talked 90 minutes. And it started well and it ended well, but the middle 70 minutes did not go well with anything in agreement. Okay, so when you say there must be some economists who understand statistics, I don't think so. I think they're paid not to. They're paid to toe the line.
Yeah. Well, it's all Keynesian is what they're taught, and there's obviously von Mises and that school, the Austrian school, is no longer in the universities. So it's it's quite Orwellian actually. People's thought processes are just completely controlled, and there's this narrow focus, and they're not even Keynesian, because Keynes would turn his grave if he saw what these headbangers, crazy people are advocating, because he was a fiscal conservative, And now not only are they talking about QE to infinity and going back to QE, they're also saying, oh, we need to do more fiscal spending as well. We need the government to spend more money, and that's really going to sort out the economy, and it will help kick the can down the road, but building bridges to nowhere, as they're doing in Japan for the last 20, 30 years, it hasn't sorted out their economy, or spending billions and billions on arms for the war with Iran and potentially Russia and China. I mean, where does it all end? It ends in bankruptcy. It's very simple. And
Mark,
it ends in the end of empire. It's very simple.
You're missing a big piece of where we devote a lot of our spending. It's to the welfare state. We call it the free shit army. Free shit army. And I saw a little bit of CNBC this morning, and they were talking about it was a Bernie Sanders socialist bullshit platform, and he said he wants to put more money in the hands of consumers, raise the minimum wage, and just do all the wrong things, not one item to develop the economy and to build it up. Business investment, no, not a single thing. And tax and more free shit army stuff. Okay. I had a point that I've been delaying on. There was a very important event, and I don't want to get into a lot of details of some of the information that I have at my avail, but there was a big important event. I think it was in 2014, that USS Donald Cook in the Black Sea, and it was basically paralyzed. It was not destroyed, and it was not given an EMP, and it was not melted down in all of its circuitry. It was just paralyzed. And what happened was the Russian military, their fighter aircraft, their SUs, they deployed a certain weapon that rendered the Aegis system. It's a radar and targeting system. It's all automated. So it rendered it useless. Meanwhile, 5 different fighter aircraft from Russian Air Force circled around for 20 minutes, gave the bird, waved, tipped their wings, showed off, while the U.S. Nice to meet you. You can't touch us. Can't touch us. Okay, it was a demo. It did no damage whatsoever. They left, and there was immediately a Pentagon meeting, highest military, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the conclusion was, we have a second-class military. Our entire targeting system for our aircraft, for our naval craft, and for our land-based systems, it can all be neutralized. Okay. Move forward about 3 years to Syria. Same thing happened. And then Russia added in the SU missiles, the S-400 missiles. And I think there was some collaboration with Trump, because a bunch of U.S. cruise missiles, by the way, they're 25-year-old technology. They're not the best. A number of the cruise missiles were shot down by the Russian defense system. And other events occurred. A lot of things occurred. And it became quite clear, we don't have the best military. So we evacuated out of Syria. And we upset the neocons in the Trump war room, who initially agreed to evacuate, and then they thought, well, let's go back to Syria. And I'm thinking, well, they can, use ISIS, their ally, their creation. They can use the Israeli army. They can, stir up a lot of trouble at the ground level. They can do some, espionage. They can do some terrorist events with third-party proxies. And, that'll keep things off balance in Syria. That's the American way. Okay, but we evacuated. The important thing is that we backed out of Syria. We approached the door in Venezuela. We surrounded them in a naval manner, and we backed away. Now we're doing the same thing with Iran. And my impression, my firm belief is we're going to realize that China and Russia are right behind them. They've got S-400 missiles. They've got a lot of advanced technology, and maybe they'll give a trial to the Iranians, and what they might find out is that the same jamming of the Aegis system might occur again, which means they've got the Russian technology. And we'll back down in a bigger geopolitical stage. That's what I expect. No world war, just more embarrassment. And we'll back away.
Yeah, it's interesting. It rings true as well. And it goes against the narrative that, you know, everyone, I think even people in the contrarian people like ourselves, or, you know, so-called gold bugs, you know, the narrative is that the US is very vulnerable financially, economically, monetarily, and obviously the dollar as the reserve currency is this Achilles heel, you know. But meanwhile, there's a narrative that the US is the most powerful military superpower in the world, and therefore that could maintain and may well maintain their dominance for a period of time. But there's a lot of question marks. You've highlighted some of them. There's other instances that have taken place that actually question that, you know. And I think the next generation of warfare is EMP. You mentioned it, electromagnetic pulse. And if that goes off over New York, you will take out Wall Street. You'll take out the financial markets for a period of time. You'll have bank holidays and all the rest of it, you know. We know how that goes. So, yeah, they're much more vulnerable than they're portraying. And I think a lot of it is bravado, and it's a distraction. It keeps these guys in power. The budgets are there. It's a lot of pigs at the trough. It's the usual pork barrel spendings type of stuff, and all these vested interests, you know. And Trump was elected to deal with that and to get them out. And unfortunately, I think you're right. He's compromised and he hasn't dealt with it, you know. But it's very interesting. Yeah, it's.
We keep backing down, Mark. We keep backing down. Is Iran going to be our third one? Well, we didn't back down in Ukraine. But what I'm hearing is we use it as a testing ground, just like we did Vietnam for experimental weapons, micronuclear bombs.
And in some ways, the Ukraine thing was almost like they were trying to foment tensions between Germany and Russia and the EU and Russia. And there was a bit of divide and conquer going on there in some ways, I think, as well, you know. Yeah. And
nothing works. I've got a saying, Mark. It's very simple. All our foreign policy, all U.S. foreign policy since 9/11, when the neocons took over, every single initiative has been a failure. Find one success. I've been saying find one success and I'll eat your dirty jockey shorts. I can't find a single success.
No, I agree with you. And because it's based on empire, and we're in a multipolar world, and these guys just don't want to look at the reality of the world we live in today, economically, financially, monetarily. They don't want to look at it. This project for a new American century, they're still going on with that crazy nonsense. This is not going to be an American century. We had the British century, 19th century. The American century was the 20th century. This 21st century is going to be Asian, and it's going to be multipolar. You know, it will be Chinese, Indian, Russian, you know, all these, city states, Hong Kong. We see what's happened in Singapore Hong Kong recently, which is interesting. Singapore, but there's also Indonesia, Malaysia. These are sort of little powers that are going to be very, very strong in the coming years, and they cannot take them all on. And they've basically burned bridges with all these, even their allies now. They've burned bridges in the EU.
I had a forecast 2 years ago. I said, we're going to begin to sanction our allies. It's just a matter of a year or two. I said that in 2014 and 15. And here we are, 2018 and 19, we're sanctioning Germany and we're threatening. You can't do things like that. Let's
and Mexico and Canada and that wall that's going up is, you know, I'd like to get your view on this, Jim. I'm going to ask you. You think that wall is actually going up not to keep the Mexicans and the people in Central and South America out of America? You think that wall is going up to keep Americans in the United States of America?
I have a very different view of the wall. I don't think it has an actual purpose in a tangible way. I don't think it's intended to stop Mexicans from entering, because there are hundreds of tunnels. It's a 2,000-mile border. It's hard to imagine this. It's a border that spans Spain, France, Germany, and Poland. It's 2,000 miles. There are tunnels everywhere. Nor do I think it's to keep the U.S. citizens in. I don't think there is a flock of Americans who want to, you know, head down to Mexico and take their life savings and have it stolen in their banks. No. And what? Rely on Mexican health care? I don't think so. Here's what I think the wall is all about. It's full of symbolism. It's full of distraction. And it's full of nonsense. Okay, there was some symbolism a while back. They were talking about a steel wall or a cement wall, and that was code word for a jail cell or a tomb for the traitors who were involved with the Russian dossier. It's a battle for nonsensical funding. Trump actually said he's going to divert $5 billion from the CIA budget. Are you kidding me? They're not going to stand for that at all, because they're running the news networks and they're running Wall Street and they're running the U.S. government. So
there's all sorts of off-balance sheet spending in that regard as well, I would think.
I call it the 7 silos, which includes human trafficking and organ trafficking. That's kind of one and the same. Okay, then you've got all this nonsense about NAFTA, and then they couldn't come to agreement because of disagreement on the wall. Okay, there's your distraction and your nonsense again. Okay, so it comes up when they need the same sort of thing that they have with China for the timetable. The wall is to the Mexican NAFTA what the timetable is to China and the trade talks. That's my view. I'm not a conventional thinker. I don't say, well, you know, they talk for an hour here on the news networks, and here's my comment on what they're saying. No, I say, here's their comments. Let's put it over here in the shitter and talk about reality. Let's take this. It's got 4 parts. That's nonsense. That's propaganda. That's a pure lie. This is a distraction. What are they avoiding? This, and this, and here's how it all relates to our reality. Okay, I dismiss most of what they talk about.
Me too. I switched it off a long time ago.
I'm not even going to read the story about blaming Iran for this incident. I'm not even going to read it. I'll get indications, and I'll get people sending me things that, Jim, did you see that the Saudis accused? Okay, there I've got a little snippet. I don't need to read it. It's total nonsense fabrication. Okay, I'd like to switch over to gold here. I've got, pardon me, I'm jittery. When I was in grade school, I got punished for not sitting still. Okay, I can't sit still. I get when I do my work, I work for 40 minutes. I go take a slug of juice. I look out the window. I come back. I work half an hour. I get up. I walk around, make a phone call, make a couple text messages. I come back. I do some work. I can't sit still. I'm just hyperactive. I got a lot of energy, fast metabolism, talk fast. I love talking with guys like, I don't want to mention names, other people who don't talk as fast, and I get in 50% more words. That's okay. But I've been having some conversations lately with one of my jackass colleagues, and he said, Jim, take credit for this as your own. I said, no, I can't do that. He said, don't mention my name. It's okay. Call it your own. I said, no, I'm going to say it's from a discussion with the jackass colleagues. Okay. Notice in the same month, Italy announced that they're going to do a panda bond to cover some Italian government debt, a panda bond being an RMB denominated debt security that invites and hopes to attract a lot of Chinese investment money, which runs, therefore, without any currency risk, like, say, the euro or a new Italian currency, whatever. The same month, Italy announced the issuance upcoming of a panda bond, and they asked for verification on access to their gold reserves. Put the two together. Usually, I think in terms of a panda bond, it's to neutralize currency risk for a Chinese investor. But Italy's looking for their gold.
Yeah.
And they don't have a small amount. Well, if their gold is real, it's not a small amount. Okay, that's a weird thing to say.
They're alleged to have, I think, 3,100 metric tons. But
right.
Given how politicians are and Italian politicians, I'm not so sure how much of that is in the bank of Rome.
And it rivals the German supply. Right. Okay. But why would they? You know, the side commentary from smarter people were saying, looks like the Italians are thinking about getting out of their debt jam by backing up some real money and maybe monetizing their gold and getting 20-to-1 ratios and dealing with their financial situation and their debt once and for all. And maybe even distributing some of their gold to their creditors in France and Germany. By the way, France has 3.5 times as much of the Italian debt compared to Germany. And my colleague said to me, Jim, I think it's the gold trade note which will be the foundation for the panda bond. They won't do a panda bond unless they post gold, and they'll frame it with an instrument called the gold trade note. This, Jim, is your gold trade note in the background, not being identified, that China is forcing on the situation for Austria, Italy, and Portugal, the 3 countries that announced they wanted panda bonds. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Gold-backed bonds. It does make sense. And the World Gold Council did research, and they were actually advocating that back in, I think it was around 2012. They were advocating, particularly in the Eurozone, given the scale of the Eurozone debt crisis. So that absolutely speaks to what you're saying, you know. And the World Gold Council are saying gold is a monetary asset, gold is a safe haven asset. Why these countries have massive debt issues and people may not buy their bonds, so why don't they utilize their monetary reserves as a way to back the bonds, and therefore people are more likely to buy the bonds, which would stop Mario Draghi having to get out his bazooka and print trillions and trillions of euros, you know. So
doesn't that mean that Italy is about to lose their gold?
Yeah, quite, if it's still there. Yeah,
well,
exactly.
I had a joke a couple of weeks ago. I said Italy got assurance that they could use their gold but not have their gold. They could link some instruments and contracts to that gold, but they couldn't hold the gold.
You think it'll end up in Shanghai, most probably, where a lot of this gold is going to end up.
It's going to end up in Shanghai, or China will say, you can hang on to a good portion of it as long as we get to own your ports. I mean, China's coming in with commercial guns blazing, not military guns blazing. Okay. All right. So that's one of my 3 points. The gold-backed bond through pandas.
They'll then use that Italian gold to buy all the good Italian red wine and all the Italian olive oil and all that good food those Italians produce.
And don't forget
all
fashion.
Going into China as well.
A lot of good, purses, shoes, and fashion. My God, Milan. Okay.
Yeah.
I lived in Italy when I was 4 and 5 years old, and I got a little bit of indoctrination that stuck with me for years. Okay, so we got the gold bond, the panda bond. Now, I've been told by the voice that the gold trade note is being used and has been for several months now. Then we got the Aramco bond offering in London. They had a disclosure, and they disclosed that they're holding $1 billion of RMB on the Aramco balance sheet, which is more than the British pound and the Japanese yen combined. It wasn't there a year ago. So who's paying for trade shipments in the form of RMB? Now, the natural guess is China. They're buying oil from the Saudis, and they're paying in RMB. Okay, that's possible. But there's another angle, a little backdoor. Maybe the Russians, who receive a ton of RMB for oil shipments to China, and we know that we know that the Saudis and Russia have an oil deal, a very strange liquidity deal. Maybe the Russians are buying Saudi oil and paying for it with RMB, and so are the Chinese. Okay, so we've got evidence that there's movement of RMB. Now, anywhere there's movement of RMB, I'm suspecting under the table is a gold trade note, because China is working to establish the gold standard, and they're doing it in subterranean, not so conspicuous manners. I believe the gold trade note is being used by Russia and China in the oil trade, and by China and the Saudis in the oil trade, and China and Qatar and other emirates, other oil monarchies, as I like to call them. So the gold trade note might be used in trade payment. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. It's very much a stealth gold standards that we're moving towards slowly but surely. And as you said, it's so subterranean, it's under the radar. And but yeah, there's just so many pieces of the jigsaw that are just slowly coming together, and all the things you've talked about over the years. So
bonds and trade payment. Okay, that's 2. And the third, March 31st, they did not want to have it April 1st. The Basle III rule change. Now, central banks can count their gold as a countable cash asset. I don't like the word cash asset. They can count it in their balance sheet toward their ratio determination.
Risk-free asset, absolutely.
Risk-free asset, right. Okay, so you've got central banks with gold working toward their asset ratios. Bonds, trade payment, central bank reserves. we've got the three stools, the three legs of the stool, rather, for the gold standard. And it's working. It's happening. Now, the voice told me like 8 months ago, 10 months ago, he said, Jim, you're going to see the gold standard come into view slowly and in an inconspicuous way. And you've got to identify the pieces if you're going to get this right. Because I can't lay it out for you. Because he's involved in some things that involve non-disclosure. Okay. Which brings us to the individuals.
One other thing, Mohammed Mahathir, you saw that, the Prime Minister of Malaysia?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so that's another little, and just the central banks are buying gold as well. That's another stool. It's a four-legged stool, and those central banks that's long-term sustainable.
Well, that's my third leg. I said central banks are converting to gold.
Sorry, wakey. Okay,
it's a countable asset. That's the third.
Yeah.
You know, you could say that's more diverse than the major central banks, and that'll be a fourth leg. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, now remember that Japan, about 3 to 6 months before Fukushima, they endorsed a Chinese regional gold currency alternative plan for use across the Pacific Rim and East Asia. And then Fukushima happened. I don't think they're unrelated. I think they're precisely and integrally tied. Okay, so notice how things are different now. That was 2011. Here we are 8 years later, and Mahathir has got major stones under his belt line to say this. Major stones. And I think you're going to see a collection of nations. I'm glad you brought this up because it's a very important point. Indonesia, Malaysia, Taiwan, Singapore, Philippines, Thailand, all the secondary nations.
Vietnam, Cambodia, yeah.
Vietnam, Cambodia. I think they're all going to sign up for this. And I didn't mention Korea, Japan, or China. Okay, so China might have said, Indonesia, we'll back you up behind the curtain and in the basements. We'll back you up, but let's get this thing moving on a regional basis. So the regional currency usage, I'm going to put that down as a fourth. Regional currency usage with gold. We're getting the elements of the gold standard. It's coming into view. And I keep mentioning the voice. These are kind of old conversations. He coached me a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. He's much more involved now with serious stuff. I don't even want to tell you what he's been involved with recently because he kind of bitched at me a year ago. I mentioned he was involved with a stress test for something. And he said, Jim, don't talk about that. This is serious stuff. I said, okay. But